introduction, but I'm going to introduce him anyway. Mr. Michael Exler, please come out here. From the East Coast Horror Group, Everything Horror. You guys put your hands together and make some noise for your moderator for the Alice Cooper panel.
Thank you, Mr. Dean. I appreciate that. All right, so there's every once in a while you get to announce a name on the stage here that's pretty special. So without further ado, let's bring the man of the hour up, Mr. Alice Cooper.
Turn off that racket.
Love you, Alice!
Yeah, Whatever, get old?
No, never.
So let's start out with the music question. What made you want to pursue a career in the entertainment industry?
I didn't really have a choice. I was 15 years old, and I was painting my house, and it was summertime, and the radio was always on in my house. And all of a sudden I heard, doo-doo, doo-doo, she loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. And I went, what was that? It was the first time I'd ever heard the Beatles. And it was an hour later I heard Please Please Me, and then I heard I Want to Hold Your Hand. There were like 5, 6 songs in a row that were the best songs I'd ever heard, and I went, well, that's what I want to do. I was either going to do that, or I was going to, something in the arts. I was a good creative writer, I was going to do something like that, but that gave me a certain direction. Once I got into rock and roll, then I looked around and said, there's a world of Peter Pans here and no Captain Hook. I need to be that sort of definitive villain of rock and roll. And that's really where Alice Cooper came in.
So talk about the start of the Alice Cooper band.
Well, we were all in high school. We were all actually on the journalism. We were all like journalism. I had a column in my paper. My name was Muscles McNasal because I was skinny, real skinny. I had a big nose, so they called me Muscles McNasal. And my column was just totally, it didn't make a bit of sense at all, which it wasn't supposed to. And Dennis Dunaway was on the cross-country track team, and he said, you got to come out for cross-country track, so I did. And I didn't know I was a runner. I was a long-distance runner. And the next thing you know, 3 of the original guys were 4-year lettermen. We were all track and cross-country guys, and won the state and everything like that. And we had no thought still of the Beatles. The Beatles came along in my sophomore year, and all of a sudden then, all 3 guys, Dennis said, I want to play bass. John Spears said, I want to play drums. I said, well, I'll be the singer. And that's the very beginnings of Alice Cooper right there. And the very first show we ever did was the Letterman's Club Talent Show, okay? Where we put wigs on and, the Beatle wigs and all this. And in that show, there was a guillotine on stage. And what a weird thing that would end up still being, there was no reason for the guillotine to be on stage, but it was there. And it kind of, I don't know if it pushed us forward or what, but it ended up being a big part of the show.
Now, other than the Beatles, who were some of your biggest influences?
Well, I was always into music. I was a little kid. I listened to the 50s music. I listened to the Beach Boys and the Four Seasons and, all the great doo-wop bands. My dad was very cool. My dad was a pastor, but he liked rock and roll. So he could tell you any verse in the Bible, and then you could say, who plays guitar for the Yardbirds? And he'd go, Jeff Beck. So that's a pretty cool dad. It's, for somebody that most people think that their dads are, especially pastors, are going to be very anti-rock and roll. He said, I have no problem with the music at all. The lifestyle I have a problem with. Sleeping around, taking drugs, and, and of course at that time we weren't doing that. We were way too young for that. But later on, he still was really enjoyed what we did on stage,
When was the first time you realized that Alice Cooper, that you really locked onto something and people really got what you were doing?
I think it's when the rejection. I think it's when our first album was reviewed as a tragic waste of plastic. Check the Lester Bangs. I thought that was a great review. We still have that review. And, you know, the only person that got what we were doing was Frank Zappa. Frank Zappa, when you listen to us, everybody else turned us down on every level, every major record company, because they were all looking for the next Buffalo Springfield. They were looking for the next Monkees or whatever. And here we were from Phoenix, and we didn't make any sense at all. You know, Frank Zappa listened to us, and he said, "I don't get it." And I went, that was, you know, immediately I went, "Oh, I'm dead." And he said, "No, you don't understand. I'm Frank Zappa, and if I don't get it, that's good." So I said, "Okay, great." You know, he says, "Yeah, I want to sign you." And still, 2 albums later, nobody got it until Bob Ezrin came along and kind of put all of the insanity into a package that made sense to an audience. You know, Love It to Death came out. That was the album with 18 and Dwight Frye and everything on it. And that was the album that really kind of launched us.
Now, to go from that, and in 1973, $1 Billion Babies was released and reached #1 in both the U.S. and the U.K. Talk about what that means as an artist to have that, you know, I guess...
It was embarrassing at a point because, you know, when you have your idols, you know, the guys that you really look up to, the Rolling Stones and the Beatles and the Who and all these bands that you learn from, and then you look at the charts and you're #1 and they're #4 and 5 and 6, you kind of go, "Geez, I hope they don't see this." You know, because you don't feel like you belong in that group at all. You know, you haven't really proved yourself yet. You've had one hit. Later on, I think, when you consistently have hit records, and you have people like Bob Dylan talking about you, and you have John Lennon talking about you, and things like that, all of a sudden then you become, everybody has to listen to you then. But that doesn't mean you change and start playing like everybody else. That means you take it further, as far as you can. It's sort of like climbing out on the limb of a tree. As far out as you can get, you're either going to be a total idiot or a genius. You know, if you fail, you're the worst idiot of all time. If you succeed, oh, he's genius. Bob Dylan, the first time I heard Bob Dylan, I went, "This guy can't sing at all." You know, this guy can't play harmonica. Second time I heard him, I went, "This guy is brilliant." I listened to what he was saying, I listened to how he was singing it, and I listened to what he was playing on the harmonica, and then I listened to the whole album and went, "Okay, this guy is a genius." You know, it takes, sometimes when you're so far different than anybody else, it takes a while for them to get it, to just get it. And once they got it, then they're addicted, you know.
Now, you created the real stage show in rock and roll. Talk about the evolution of that. You know, all the fans in here, we loved it and embraced it back then. And also talk about some of the critics that you had.
Well, you know, the thing was, I would go to see the Who and the Rolling Stones, and they were great. I mean, they were terrific. Mick Jagger, how do you beat that? The guys made it. Pete Townsend, you know, with the windmill thing, he was probably the epitome of what the spirit of rock and roll. Keith Moon. But I looked at it and I said, there's a gigantic empty canvas behind them. To me, you had all this theatrical music and nothing visual. And I said, well, why can't you do that kind of music and then make it come alive on stage? If you say, "Welcome to my nightmare," give them the nightmare. Don't just talk about it. Give them the nightmare. How do you do that? Well, we have to, first of all, it's going to have to be a bed on stage. And if it was a nightmare, what would be happening? The bed would be tilted this way, certainly wouldn't be flat. There would be things under the bed, because when you're having nightmares, there's always things under the bed. Only this time, they were real dancers who came out from under the bed. So, you know, we produced it to be a full-out nightmare. And it was like a real roll of the dice. We have no idea if anybody's going to like this or not. We thought, you know, once again, you're either going to be a moron or you're going to be, you know, really regarded as something totally new. But it worked. You know, people liked the album first, and then they weren't expecting the show. When they saw the show, they were just like, "Geez, what is that?" You know.
Talk about some of the criticisms, obviously, in the 70s. You know, things were intense. Did you have a lot of?
Yeah, you know, people would first talk about the show, and I don't think they listened to the music at all. I think people were missing the fact that the music was the cake. The theatrics was the icing on the cake. If you didn't have the music to back it up, you had nothing. You know, If you went to an Alice Cooper rehearsal, if it was 10 hours, 8 hours would be on the music. It would be 8 hours of these guys nailing these songs, and so that the audience gets, oh, okay, I really get what you're saying. Then you put the theatrics on top of that, and then you have something that's really incredible. Because you see the whole package. I've seen theatrical bands that are really theatrical and really fun to watch, but you listen and you go, there's nothing there. There's no music there. There's nothing to back it up. So you have to have those lyrics and the songs that people walk away going, oh man, I'm almost a nice guy, I love that song. Or, Ballad of Dwight Pride, that was with a Straight Jacket, I love that song. They have to love the songs first before they love the band.
So you've written a large number of concept albums. Do the concept albums tend to be planned, or do you just get on a writing crew?
I start with the title. I always start with the title. If you're going to say Along Came a Spider, what was that spider? What did that represent? To me, he was a serial killer. And he left his, he sort of left his victims wrapped in silk, and with a body part missing, because he was building his own thing, but it wrapped everything in silk. And finally somebody picked up on it and went, this guy's a spider. This guy thinks he's a spider because that's his modus operandi, And so when you have that, now you can write all these great songs about how he thinks, why he would do this, what makes him do this. Does he, you can go psychologically in it, you can be funny, because there's certain songs on that album that are really funny. Same thing with Brutal Planet, same thing with Dragon Town, or The Last Temptation. From the inside, there's always a lot of drama, a lot of comedy, and a lot of horror in each one.
Now, I heard the late David Bowie once say in an interview that he didn't want to be a human jukebox. Now, do you ever tire of playing the same songs, or are you just so excited that your fans are excited?
I think I asked him about that one time. I had dinner with him and a couple of other people, sci-fi writers, and I said, why wouldn't they, if an audience is coming to see you, you don't think they want to hear your songs? I know that when we do 25 songs on stage, 20 of them are going to be songs that the audience wants to hear. They want to hear $1 Billion Babies and School's Out and 18 and Poison and Only Women Bleed, all the songs that were hits. I said, then you have 5 or 6 songs that you can bring in that are the deeper cuts to satisfy yourself. But come on, they're paying all this money to hear those songs that they are in love with. If I went to see the Rolling Stones and they did all new songs, that's not why I went to see them. I wanted to hear the songs that made me connect to them. So I have no trouble doing all those songs. Each show, though, we try to find a different way to do that song. We try to package that song a little bit differently. This year with Elected, it was pretty easy. we had Trump and Hillary come out. I don't know if you've seen the show, but they come out at the end of Elected, and they shake hands, and I said, okay, well, great. And she turns around and he pinches her on the ass, and she goes like that and smacks him, and they fight, and then they look at each other, and then she falls down in a great big kiss, and the audience goes crazy. They love it. She gets up and beats him to death, and he beats her to death. Nobody wins. Like the election, nobody wins. But the audience got the satire. And in the end, all I had to do was step on the podium and just go. Choice. Now we have shirts out there that say, "Don't blame me. I voted for Alice." I don't think we could have won either way, and either election. I don't think we could have won either way. But I say give the guy a chance. If she would have won, I would have said give her a chance.
So you've written a lot of songs for films. Which one are you particularly proud of?
There's 2 songs that we wrote for Monster Dog that we wrote them in Spain, and they were two songs that I am really seriously considering redoing, because we didn't really give them a chance. That movie was one of those movies. It was the first thing I did sober. Okay, I came out of the hospital and I had to decide, am I able to work sober? And so Shep and I decided, well, we'll take this movie in Spain. They promised it was only going to be released in the Philippines, you know. And of course it got released everywhere. Monster Dog, and it was me playing a real straight character part, where I had to be there every morning at 6 o'clock, in full out thing, had to know my lines and everything like that. And then we had to write 2 songs for it. And we wrote these 2 songs that I'm really kind of attached to. Never have done them on stage, but I'm really thinking seriously they might be on the next album. But the deal about this movie was, after we did the whole movie, the whole cast was British or American, filmed in Spain. And we got the print back. You know, I'm in the States by now, you know, the whole thing, and I turn it on, and we're driving along in the van, and all of a sudden I go, hey, what's going on over here? They overdubbed my voice in some truck driver from, you know, Spain. Everybody in the whole movie got overdubbed. And it was the most ridiculous overdubbing I'd ever heard in my life. I said, do I sound like that? You know, it was hysterically funny, because we all spoke English, and they made it sound like we didn't speak English. You know, but still, the movie was one of those great turkeys. If you go and check World's Greatest Turkeys, I'm in 3 of them. Yeah. Sergeant Pepper. Yay. I took that movie so I could work with George Martin. George Martin's producing, yeah. I get to sing with George Martin, yeah. Okay, I'm in. And I get to beat up the Bee Gees. There you go. How can you pass that up? You know?
Another film you were in was Wayne's World.
Yeah.
Talk about working on that film.
Well, the Wayne's World thing was funny because, you know, Michael's an old friend of mine. And when I got there, I was just supposed to do the song, Feed My Frankenstein. And they come back, you know. And he says, on the way here I wrote something. He says, you can handle some lines, right? And I go, well, yeah, I'm an actor, I can handle the lines. And he hands me about 20 pages. And I went, what is this? And he goes, those are the lines. I said, okay. When are we shooting this? He said, about 20 minutes. So about half of the things I was saying in the thing, I was just making it up as I went along. Every take was a different set of things. Now, what you didn't see was Dana and Mike, when they're doing the We're Not Worthy thing, that went on for about 8 minutes. And it got vile. It got really dirty. And I don't know who owns the outtakes for that. But, that movie was really fun to do. It was when you're doing movies like that, it's not really work. It's just having fun with it, you know. And working with Mike Myers and those guys, I mean, they're the best.
So it was almost like not taking yourself too serious. You know,
oh no, the whole idea that the band sounded like Jeopardy, you know, guys. They knew everything about everything. And the funny thing is these guys actually are like that. You can ask the guitar player about, environment in South America, and they'll say, oh yeah, well, the average temperature down there is... The guys in my band are very, very smart guys.
How did your appearance on the Muppet Show come about? And did you ever get a Muppet in your likeness?
Yes, actually they did do one for me. But when I got offered the Muppet Show was #1 show in the entire world. Not just in America, in the world. Because it wasn't white people making fun of black people, or red people making fun of... It was... The people were purple. And and they weren't real people, and they were allowed to make fun of each other. So it wasn't a racism kind of thing at all. I got the offer, and I went, I watch the show every week, and I love it. It's great. But I've just established this horror image of myself, and I don't want to water it down by doing the Muppets, And I said, who did the last 4 shows? And they said, Christopher Lee, Vincent Price. I said, I'm in. I'm in. And when you get there and you do the show, they shot it in London. And we spent a week rehearsal down there. you get so used to talking to the Muppets as people that they become people. And I'll be sitting there, with Miss Piggy here, and we're rehearsing, and without thinking, I'm going, it would be funnier if you put your head on my shoulder, and we would do. And she, oh, it's a good idea. And you'd go for a half an hour talking to this hand, but it's Miss Piggy, and you really are buying into it, And Kermit's coming along, going, hey, you guys are getting along pretty well. I said, hey, she's coming on to me, okay? I got little hoof prints all over me. She was a pig. But I had never had so much fun doing anything in my life as the Muppets. You can imagine. Even the rehearsals were hysterically funny. But they were hard work. You really had to learn the dance moves. And you're dancing with these gigantic Muppets. If you get in their way, they'll knock you over. But it was with Jim Henson, Frank Oz. It was all the original guys, So I really count that as one of the best things we ever did was the Muppet Show.
So in Decline of Western Civilization Part 2, you got bleeped out while saying the initials
Yes.
of someone that might have copied you.
Well, it wasn't might have copied me. And I can tell you who it was, even though we're friends now, Blackie Lawless. It was like we were, at that time, all these bands were coming out, and Wasp I'd see their show and I said, that's not like our show, that is our show. He was doing exactly all the same things I was doing on stage, but it was them doing it. And so it wasn't professional, but I did take a shot at them on that one. I never thought Ozzy Osbourne did what Alice did. I never thought what, Kiss did was what Alice did. We all approached it in our own different style. It was rock and roll, but like Kiss were for comic book characters, Ozzy was his own type of insanity. Alice was sort of the Phantom of the Opera somewhere in there. So we never stepped on each other's toes, really. But when there was a band that was going exactly what you were doing, then it just got under my skin a little bit. But we're friends after that, and he's totally changed his show and did other things. But at the time, it was irritating.
I always thought King Diamond might have been.
Yeah, King Diamond again was, the European thing always had its own twist to it, and the Alice Cooper thing was never satanic. See, there was never upside down crosses on my stage. There was never, anything. In fact, if anything, a lot of my lyrics weren't against satanic. Coming from a Christian background, that was just part of my life, but it still is. But there was a lot of, a lot of the band. One of the funniest things you'll ever see in your life, I don't know if you ever pick up any Norwegian death metal magazines. It's hysterical. They either want to be the offspring of Satan or Vikings. And you can't even pronounce the name of the band. And they're always, and every single picture is this. And I call it the invisible orange picture. They're looking at the invisible orange, But it's hysterical that every band wants to be more evil than the other band. We're more evil. We ate our lead singer. They did. One band actually ate their lead singer. He died and they fried him up and ate him. So they win. White flag, you guys are evil. All right, I get it. Have a good time.
So, with the state of rock and roll today, who are some of the people that you enjoy?
There's a lot of great bands. There's bands like Foo Fighters are a great band. I mean, they're a great rock and roll band. I find that a lot of the newer bands are anemic. I'm sorry, but the only bands that really they come out and do a show anymore are metal bands and hard rock bands. But I mean, it's always kind of discouraging to me to see 17-year-old kids, oh, I feel so bad about the environment. I hope we don't have any more wars about oil. And I'm going, sing about your girlfriend. Every great song was about your girlfriend, wasn't it? Think about it. What was the last Rolling Stones song about the environment? but I just find that the energy's not there. You know, the bands now, they all want to look alike. If you have a banjo and an accordion in your band, you're probably not a rock band. Okay? I got in trouble for saying this about Mumford and Son. And I wasn't dissing them one bit. Not one bit. I said they're great at what they do. I said it's sort of an Irish folk upbeat, which I love because I'm part Irish, you know. They took it that I was calling them not rock and roll. I said, no, their first album wasn't rock and roll. The next album they did was pure rock and roll. They came out and did a real hard rock album. And I think that's the band I was kind of looking for with them. But I wasn't insulting them, you know. I was just saying, like, if you're in the Lumineers, you shouldn't be in the same category as the Who. You know, there's a huge, huge gap between those bands. I don't know what to call the new bands. It's sort of a product of technology, but it doesn't rock, you know. AC/DC rocks. Sorry, you know, the bands that when you turn them on and you go, oh, and you're doing this, that's a rock band. When you're listening to a band and going, that's not a rock band. So, young bands should be rock. There's a band called the Stripes from Ireland that are unbelievable. That's one of the best bands I've heard in years. The Struts from England, great band. Because a rock band has got to have attitude. You don't play guitar up here. You play a guitar down here. You play a guitar from your crotch. You don't play it by your chest. That's the whole difference. Rock and roll is all about attitude. If you go up there with the attitude of, gosh, I hope you like us tonight. You know, I want a band that takes me by the throat and holds me and grabs me and tells me, you know, that's what we do. We take an audience and we go out there aggressive. We don't go out there passive at all.
Now, someone I always thought that you were probably a huge inspiration on him was Rob Zombie. Talk about your relationship with him and what you think of his stage production.
Well, I saw White Zombie, you know, and they were great. I thought they were really good. They all looked like they had died years ago. You know, they had cobwebs on them and they were dusty and everything. And I right then knew that Rob knew what he was doing. And then they became Rob Zombie, and Rob's probably my best friend in the business, you know. And he took a techno approach to it, but he didn't water it down. He didn't make it soft. It's pounding in your ears, which is great. When we toured together, we had a great time because we just tried to outdo each other every night, you know, and fun to watch him. And he understands that horror and comedy are in bed together. I mean, if you're not laughing at The Evil Dead, there's something really wrong with you. You know, I mean, Ash, you know, I'm watching it, you know, and he's standing there, Bruce Campbell, and I'm going, there can't be any more blood in this movie. And right as I said that, the pipe breaks, and he covers him in blood. And I burst out laughing. I said, this is hysterical. This is really, really good. If you're not laughing at horror movies, it's like going on a roller coaster and not having fun. You know, horror movies are supposed to give you a thrill and make you laugh at the end. Because you're kind of embarrassed that you were scared. You know. But that's what a good horror movie does. You know, I mean, that's nothing worse than a boring horror movie.
Sort of go off of that, you know, being that we're at a horror convention, what are some of your favorite horror films?
I surprise people when I tell people this. I've seen just about every horror film there is. I think the most effective, I think the scariest movie of all time would still be The Exorcist. Only because it speaks more to your soul, not to your logic. You can watch, you know, Freddy Krueger, and you can watch, you know, Mike Myers, and you can watch, you know, Jason, and you can write that's the boogeyman. Okay, that can't really happen. The Exorcist, you go, that can and has happened. Demonic, possession has happened. So there's something real about this. that I can't just dismiss. And I think that's what makes The Exorcist so scary. Same thing with Alien. First time you saw Alien, you realize, well, we don't really know what's out there. This could actually be out there. My favorite horror movie, just for the sake that there was 5 or 6 scenes in it, and the music and everything made it work so well, was Salem's Lot. With David Soul, made for TV, Toby Hooper directed it. And there may be 5 or 6 scenes that made you go, what? The first time you see Barlow, they spend 3 hours talking about Barlow, Mr. Barlow, Mr. Barlow. And then the next, when you finally see him, he's the entire screen. And it's the most frightening vampire anybody's ever seen in their life. My daughter was 5 years old, and she's sitting there, and the scene where the guy's in the jail cell, and he's just kind of wiping his eyes, and you just see the jail cell open. And then it's like that. She went like this and ran into the wall. To this day, Barlow is still her favorite vampire of all time. And still, I thought the music, there were great scenes when he's trying to make a cross out of tongue depressors. And he's trying to recite the Lord's Prayer, but he can't remember it. And the girl behind him is under the sheets is starting to move. It's really perfect. The kid floating outside and scratching on the window. Let me in. I mean, there was some truly great scenes in that movie. So that's my favorite horror movie of all time, is Salem's Lot.
You mentioned him.
Not the one with Rob Lowe. They made the vampire in that look like something, from Halloween Land, but.
You mentioned his name before, Vincent Price.
Yeah.
He's probably one of the most iconic horror actors.
Yeah.
When meeting him, were you taken aback?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we knew that we had to have a voice on Welcome to My Nightmare, where we had created the Black Widow. We created the Spider Museum, basically. Now we needed a curator that was going to have a voice that everybody knew that voice immediately. And we went through a bunch of names, like this, and finally somebody said Vincent Price, and I said, well, yeah, but I mean, we're never going to get Vincent Price. And we said, well, why not call him and see? So we called him, and he says, when do you want me there? And I went, now? He said, I'll be right there. He showed up, he saw the script for it, and he said, can I rewrite some of it? And I said, absolutely. So he rewrote some of it, came in, did it in 2 takes, and then we said, now, we're really stretching this, but we're going to do a video for this. And he said, when? I'm available, let's go. We went to Toronto for 2 weeks, and he shot for 2 weeks with us in this video. And he said, are you going to do this on stage? I went, yeah, and he says, okay, where? I went, are you kidding me? We're going to get Vincent Price on stage? And he did the first 2 shows of Welcome to My Nightmare, live on stage, which was like crazy. And by the way, we gave him his first platinum album, not Michael Jackson. I had Michael come up to me when Thriller came out, and he says, we kind of used Nightmare as a blueprint for Thriller. And I went, really? Didn't know. Couldn't feel, oh, yeah, I didn't even think, yeah, Vincent Price, geez.
So in 2011, you were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame by Rock. Talk about what that was like to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and also being inducted by what you said is your best friend.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing about it is you never, when you're in a garage learning songs to play at a party that night with a bunch of guys that are, just as amateur as you could get, the last thing you're thinking of is having a #1 record. The last thing you're thinking of is that even ever making a record. Getting a #1 record and then getting in the Hall of Fame, those things are just so far past anything you could imagine, So when it does come about, it's, pretty shocking, because you look at who's in there. The nice thing about the Hall of Fame is this: you're being voted in by your peers. You're not being voted in by just a popular thing. It's the very same people you learn from. It's like your teachers kind of giving you a passing grade, and you look and there's 20 people being nominated and you're one of the 5 that actually make it, that means that, you know, everybody was voting on you. Everybody from Jeff Beck to Paul McCartney was voting on you, and you're getting their approval. That, to me, that's pretty important. You know, if it was a popularity contest, it would be different. But when it's those guys, you know, giving you the passing grade, that kind of gives you a whole different, you know, acceptance kind of thing.
I read that some artists have said it should just be called the Hall of Fame, the Music Hall of Fame. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, you know, because you're stretching it on some things saying, what's rock and roll? You know, there's a few bands that I look at and I go, really? Is that rock and roll? You know, but I think it would be better to call it the Music Hall of Fame. And everybody has their people that they want to get in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Everybody sits there and goes, well, how come the Moody Blues are not in? You know, everybody has their favorites. I cannot believe that Burt Bacharach is not in the Hall of Fame. He wrote more hits than the Beatles, and he's not in the Hall of Fame. And I'm going there, how is that possible? You know, I mean, when you say rock and roll, if you're calling all those songs that he wrote in the 50s, 60s, 70s not rock and roll, well, they were hits on rock and roll stations. They had to be rock and roll, you know. So that's one that I don't get, you know. Bon Jovi, you know, there's another band that should be in the Hall of Fame. They did everything you're supposed to do. But I mean, it's also very eclectic, you know. I went in with Tom Waits, Darlene Love, Neil Diamond, and who else was it? Could have been the right place, could have been the wrong time. Oh, what's it? Yeah. And so that was a very eclectic group to go into the Hall of Fame, because we were, if you looked at all of them, you know, there was, I'm sure Tom Waits hasn't sold a ton of records, but he was very effective, and he was something that actually did something different. And same with a lot of people. You know, you get people into the Hall of Fame that aren't necessarily a lot of records, so Laura Nyro, people like that, but they affected so many other writers that gave them that jump. Paul Butterfield Blues Band, you know, didn't sell a lot of records, but you listen to it and you go, oh my gosh, they invented electric blues, you know. So that's actually how you get in. Getting nominated is the hard part. Getting voted on is the thing.
So you started a group called Hollywood Vampires with Joe Perry and Johnny Depp. Talk about the formation of that group and the story behind it.
Well, we were doing Dark Shadows in London, and Tim Burton and Johnny, and I knew Johnny was a good guitar player, and maybe more than other people did. One night I said, we're going to go play the 100 Club after we get done shooting, and we're just going to be a bar band. No makeup, nothing, no props. We're just going to get up, whatever song anybody yells out, we're going to play. I said, you want to play? And Johnny says, sure. And he comes down, you know, and somebody would yell out brown sugar, we do brown sugar. Somebody say, back in the USSR. Okay, yeah, back in the USSR. We did a whole night like that, and I realized at that point, I was talking to him about the original Hollywood Vampires, who were the guys that would meet at the Rainbow every night and drink until the last guy standing. Now, that was John Lennon, Keith Moon, myself, Bernie Taupin, Mickey Dolenz, and it went with Harry Nilsson, all these people. And I said, it would be great to put a band together and do an album for all of our dead drunk friends. Who they were. These are the guys we drank with, Jim Morrison, Jimi Hendrix, you know, Mark Bolan. And Johnny said, that's a great idea, why don't we do that? Right as I said that, Joe Perry walked in, he goes, I'm in. Duff McKagan, I'm in. So right there you had a band. I had 2 guitar players, a bass player. We needed a drummer. Matt Sorm and said, I'll do it. You know, Zach Starkey for Ringo Sons. I'm in. And pretty soon we're standing there, you know, doing these songs. Bob S. was producing them, you know, and Paul McCartney walks in. Now, when Paul McCartney walks in, it's one thing to be a friend of Paul McCartney. It's another thing to be in the studio with Paul McCartney. Because now you're in his world. You can't get any better than him when it comes to being in the studio. And we're all playing, you know, like a jam band, and then he walks in, he sits down at the piano. And he goes, okay. I wrote this song for Badfinger. If you want it, anytime, come and get it. Alice, you take the middle part. Bring it down, you. I'm like this. Okay, yeah. So we all acted very cool. When he's, as soon as he turns around, you know, we're all going, yeah, okay, that's a good idea, man. Great. He turns around the piano and all of us go. Johnny's looking at me going, good Mike, Bob Ezra. As soon as he turned around, he goes, what did we say, Paul? We did the thing in 2 takes. And every time I see Paul now, he still goes, am I still a vampire? I go, I smell blood all over you. So he's a vampire. And I think he might have done it just because, you know, not only does he really love to play music more than anything else, we were honoring John too. We did cold turkey for John because John was a vampire every night. He was there every night, you know. And I think that Paul and John were like that. They might have argued and everything. If you said something bad about John to Paul, even at their worst time, Paul would get up and walk out of the room. If you said something bad about Paul to John, he'd take a swing at you. Because you couldn't say, you weren't allowed to say anything bad about his best friend. And that's what type of they really were.
You guys did a tribute to Lemmy.
Yeah.
Talk about preparing yourself for that, because Lemmy had a distinctive voice. So taking on that, those songs.
Well, Lemmy was everybody's best friend. I think everybody here has seen Lemmy play at one time, Motorhead. He was just such a mainstay in the business. Not just metal, just for almost every festival he played. And he was really the real deal. The last time I saw Lemmy, he goes, Alice, hey, I quit drinking whiskey. I said, that's good. I drink vodka now. I said, I'm sure your liver knows the difference. But he was one of those guys that you couldn't find one person that would say anything bad about Lemmy. He was one of those guys that one of everybody's favorite guys. So when he passed away, and he passed away on his own terms, it was just a natural. When we did the Grammy Awards, he said, what are we going to do? He said, well, everybody's paying tribute to Bowie, which is great, and all these people that died. I said, let's do Lemmy. And it was just, we got his hat, we got his amp, we got his guitar, put it on stage. And I think people appreciated the fact that he was truly rock and roll. Lemmy was truly rock and roll.
One final question to the horror, the theatrics and everything. You also have a passion for golf.
Yeah.
Talk about how you became...
Golf can be a horror. No, I had an addictive personality, and I realized that there was no such thing as one beer. There was no such thing as one drink. One beer lasted me 15 years. There was just a constant flow. I had no idea that I was an alcoholic. I had no idea that I had an addictive personality. Then I started realizing, I was looking at my life, and I realized I love TV. I've got 22 TVs in my house, and they're always on at all times. I've been married for 40 years. I love my wife, but I'm also addicted to her. We're like inseparable. So everything that I really love, I do extremely. Obviously, rock and roll. I love playing Alice Cooper, so I'm going to keep playing Alice Cooper until it just doesn't work anymore. I had to come up with some addiction. I quit drinking. I got up one morning and threw up blood, and I thought that was a pretty good indication I was going to die. And I said, I got to find something that will take up 4 or 5 hours that's going to addict me to it. I was a good baseball player. I said, so golf. I live in Arizona. I'll go hit a golf ball. And I went out and I hit the first ball. I hit it right down the middle. Perfect shot. And the pro says, well, how long have you been playing? I said, about a minute. But when I hit that shot, it was a feeling of, there was some perfection in it. There was something that I really enjoyed, the perfection of the swing, the perfection of the ball going down the fairway. And then I thought, I am so screwed. Because nobody wants to see Alice Cooper play golf. So I had to really come to a point of really separating Alice from me. I realized that what killed Jim Morrison was Jim trying to be Jim all the time. What killed Jimi Hendrix was the exact same thing. What killed Janis Joplin was exactly the same thing. They were the character off stage and on stage. In order for you to do that, it's a very unnatural state. You have to fuel it with something. Drugs, alcohol, whatever. And eventually that's going to kill you. So I'm thinking, geez, my image is 3 times more intense than theirs. How am I going to live with Alice? And for a long time, there was no boundaries here. I didn't know when I was Alice or when I was me. And when I got sober, I decided I am not going to be the same Alice now. If I look at the old Alice, Alice was a whipping boy. He was the outcast, and he represented all the outcasts. And he was the one that society hated. Even rock and rollers hated Alice. There was something about him being this loser that was on stage. They'd cut his head off, they'd do all this stuff to him, and everybody was rid of him, right? I decided now that I'm sober, I'm going to make Alice this really insufferable villain. He's going to be Alan Rickman times 10. You know, just arrogant as can be. And I think the audience is going to like this version of Alice. Because he's not going to go up there beaten. He's going to go up there in total control. And I found that Alice a lot more fun to play. You know, because it was something you look forward to every night. I'm nothing like that character. You know, I'm nothing like the character on stage. So for me to go up on stage and become, you know, this, you're all filth, you know. I said, that's going to be fun to play that character. And it still is. That's how I love to play the Alice character, is this horrific villain. But, you know, he's also got a little Clouseau in him. So every once in a while he's going to slip on a banana peel at just the right time. So the audience gets a laugh out of him also. But there were 2 separate Alices, 2 entirely different Alices. Early Alice was beaten. The other Alice that's sober was a much more aggressive winner.
Well, sir, thank you for taking some time. Ladies and gentlemen, please give your hands together for Alice Cooper.
This is a good Alice.
For Mr. Mike Watson, for the East Coast Group, and Mr. Alice Cooper.